Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our Saturday afternoon Zoom here with Victoria Electric Vehicle Association. I'm Glenn Gary. I'm one of the board members with the board. Heather Kellington, wave your hand there, Heather, our vice president, and Jim Henshaw is our producer. We're on here today. We've got a bunch of good stuff to launch into, plus all the chit chat that comes after formal presentations. That's all good. I'm going to start off on a bit of a sad note, and that is that Fred Wiseman, our first president for the Victoria Leaf Club, as we were known back 11 years ago, died recently in his happy place, luckily, in Thailand. He was a real pioneer. He was on board before a lot of people had many things figured out, and he got in people's faces. He did all the right stuff as a advocate should do. We're going to miss him, and when the time comes, we'll release information with regards to his services and stuff. But we're going to miss him. We've had a lot of calls from around the community, people who remember him in the early days of electric vehicles. And yeah, it's not a shock, but still a big loss. So moving on, I'm going to do my share screen there, Jim.
Go ahead.
We as an organization, as you know, you pay nothing to be a member here. We've always taken that as one of the key things we want to do in our advocacy. We want to make it as open and inclusive for everybody possible. Having said that, we do spend money. The people who do the work on the board and other people, we're all unpaid volunteers. We put on Eco Night, our WHL hockey game with the Victoria Royals. That sucks a lot of money. Just having insurance takes a lot of money as well. When we do travel somewhere to cover off, go to meetings or go to see a new vehicle or a new whatever, we do that all out of pocket, pretty happily, because this is a labor of love for us and a commitment to our communities in British Columbia. Having said that, there are ways for people to help. So one thing that would be great to do, if you can, we have some swag. We have the ever popular PVA t-shirts coming in both crew neck and V-neck, and a multitude of sizes. And they're $25 each. We have the mask, which is a one of. And you notice that says no emissions down there.
Good one.
Yeah. And we also have our Victoria EV Association stickers, $7 each, or 2 for 10. So bear that in mind. If you ever want those things, contact us at the regular email address. And if you're anywhere Nanaimo South, it'll be delivered to you with 0 emissions. Elsewhere, well, we'll put in the mail as best we can. Okay. Yeah, it just helps us to get through things and yeah, keep us rolling. Right. Now we're going to roll in today's guest. Is Tom still here?
Yep.
Oh, there he is.
I'm there.
Yeah, good. Tom Hackney. He's with the British Columbia Sustainable Energy Association. And they are part of what we, VicEVA does, is that we try and keep in contact with other non-governmental organizations, like-minded organizations who are all fighting for the same sorts of things, a cleaner, better environment. And BCSEA is important in that they've been around a very long time. They've been on the right side of the issues, and they also get to talk to important bodies at government, as we do. But one of the ones they hit most of the time is the BC Utilities Commission. So, important things. Tom here is the expert we have, and we're going to let him launch right now. Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Glenn. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here speaking to the Victoria EV Association. You guys are doing great work, and oh my goodness, I want to share, but where the heck's the right file? I'll try again. There we go. Is that properly shared?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So, oh, no, that's wrong. That's the end of it. There we go. So thank you, everyone, and glad to be here. The BCSEA acknowledges that it is headquartered on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, and over 200 Aboriginal groups have their homes and traditional territories in British Columbia, where the BCSEA's activities all take place. What I'd like to cover in this afternoon is talk a little bit about BCSEA and its activities, give a high-level picture of energy and climate policy in BC and its implementation through regulation. I'd like to talk a bit about BCSEA's BCUC work. Then I'll go into some of the EV charging issues that come up at the BCUC. And then I'll talk a little bit about Measurement Canada's work on metering. And, oops, pardon me.
And Tom, perhaps I'll get people, if you have questions for Tom as they come up during the presentation, if you'd put them in the chat, and then we'll read them at the end.
Yeah, sure. And happy to take questions of clarification if necessary as we go along. Let's see. So yeah, Measurement Canada's work, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So BCSEA is a member-supported association of practitioners, activists, supporting sustainable energy policy, innovation, and education in BC. We have a vision of a 100% sustainably powered BC, and our mission is to advance energy literacy in BC. So please join us if you have any inclination in that direction. Your membership strengthens us as an organization and allows us to speak more forcefully to governments and the BC Utilities Commission. BCSEA was founded way back in 2004 by ecofuturist Guy Dauncey to address a vacuum in advocacy for sustainable energy. And our current activities include education, networking, public outreach, advocacy and policy development, and BC Utilities Commission interventions. One of our flagship educational effort is the Cool It Climate Leadership Training Program, which is free for elementary and high school classes. It consists of in-class or currently virtual, I guess, workshops and take-home climate challenges, and includes greenhouse gas impact assessment from the activities of the students that we get them to undertake, putting pressure on their parents to reduce energy use in their homes and stuff like that, and there are prizes and like. Results for this past year in Kulit, we were in about 248 classes, reached 5,779 students, about 27,000 student actions were recorded, and an estimated 1,587 tons of greenhouse gas emissions avoided. Another thing we do is webinars on topical issues. In the past, we've hosted Energy Connections, an annual networking conference for sustainable energy practitioners. That was pre-COVID. Not sure what we're going to do to fill that gap going forward, but stay tuned. One current campaign we have is Switch It Up BC. This is a public awareness campaign on greenhouse gas emissions and health issues associated with using natural gas in homes. And we have a system for support and pledging for homeowners to switch to heat pumps and electric cooking. And the image here is a sticker that you can get and paste on your existing furnace to remind you that when it blows up, don't switch like for like, move to an electric heat pump. Our BCSEA's Vancouver chapter has run Women in Sustainable Energy annual networking event. Victorians for Transportation Choice, in the last two local government elections, the BCSEA Victoria chapter teamed up with a bunch of other transportation groups and sent out candidate surveys on sustainable transportation. We've got very good participation by candidates, lots of, especially in the core areas, more than 50% participation. And in 2018, we had about 17,000 website visits during the election period. So on people's radar. Here's one of our early forays into the energy policy. Back in the 2005 BC general election, we produced our sustainable policies for BC, 28 sustainable energy policy proposals, including carbon tax, declining cap on fossil fuel production, fee-baits to incent the purchase of efficient vehicles and disincent the purchase of gas guzzlers. So moving to the state of energy and climate policy in BC today, I'm going to say that we have quite progressive commitments by the BC government, and the point we're at is struggling with big challenges of implementation. So we have legislated greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, which are in line with the scientific evidence. We have the Clean BC Climate Action Plan and the Roadmap to 2030, which together identify where the government means to find the greenhouse gas emission savings and to a large extent how it proposes to achieve them. We've got the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Regulation, affectionately known as GGRR, and this enables the government to order the BC Utilities Commission to allow utilities to make spending on electrification, EV charging, renewable natural gas, and similar initiatives. A bit more about that in a couple of slides. We've got the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuel Requirements Regulation, which specifies a maximum carbon intensity for liquid fuels, and this is a declining cap, so it's going to be ratcheted up as time goes by. Zero Emissions Fuel Act pushing vehicle dealers in BC towards zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles mainly. And BC Energy Step Code for buildings. You've got the carbon tax, annual progress reporting, planning for adaptation to climate change, and some initial work to define a green economy so that we can figure out an alternative to producing and exporting all those fossil fuels. So a bit more about the roadmap to 2030. Key features include the promise by the government to legislate a hard cap on the greenhouse gas emissions from the customers of BC's natural gas utilities. This would be about a 47% reduction in emissions from those utilities, or about 6 megatons per year. So this is significant. The government has not yet brought in the legislation. If you're of a mind to put pressure on the government, like writing in or talking to the minister or whatever, this would probably be a good topic to steal their resolve on and push them forward to make progress on it. Another thing is the government's commitment that renewable natural gas should make up at least 15% of the gas deliveries by 2030. And this is a very significant indication of how the government means to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction targets. And we've got a promise of a clean energy, clean transportation plan. Consultations are happening now. Another opportunity to make your views known to the government. And finally, the government has promised to put carbon pollution standard into the BC Building Code, which is very significant for local governments who want to green their planning and green their buildings, specifically supporting a switch off of natural gas to electric for space and water heating. So to its credit, the government has also got an accountability mechanism, and the government's own accountability report says that their modeling demonstrates that BC's climate action plan will achieve 97% of the 2030 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, which is pretty good according to their account. Also, to their credit, is that they have struck a council, a watchdog council, the Climate Solutions Council, which has also produced its report of the government's actions. And here we see a little bit more skeptical picture. So they're saying success. These are selected quotes, and it's like success is threatened, but in areas where policy development and implementation is proceeding too slowly. And relevant to transportation, continued growth of medium and heavy duty emissions will eclipse the gains made by zero emissions low duty vehicles. So there you go. This is challenging work, and the government is challenged. So to the BC Utilities Commission and their role in implementing energy climate policy through regulation. Regulation of energy utilities in BC is what is called economic regulation. The focus is mostly on making sure that ratepayers get safe, reliable energy at reasonable cost. And this is a quasi-judicial process. There are formal processes for utilities to apply to the Utilities Commission to set their rates, to make capital expenditures, to extend their lines, or a whole bunch of other things that the commission oversees. There are formal rules for interveners to participate in a proceeding, mostly ratepayers or ratepayer groups. There are formal rules of evidence. Usually people get legal counsel to represent them because it is really complex. And the hearing takes place in front of a panel of commissioners who review the evidence and make a decision. So in terms of a selection of some of the legal parameters the commission must consider, the BCUC must consider BC's energy objectives in the Clean Energy Act, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions in BC, encouraging fuel switching to lower carbon fuels and the like. But BCUC must allow a utility to recover in its rates the costs of any prescribed activities undertaken under the greenhouse gas reductions regulation. And these activities include incenting the use of compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas to replace diesel fuel in transportation, for example, acquiring renewable natural gas, hydrogen, syngas, or lignin to displace fossil natural gas in the gas system. And this is a key part of the government's strategy to decarbonize energy use. Incenting customers to use electricity instead of fossil fuels, and installing EV public charging stations. So so basically what this means is that the government is keeping a pretty tight rein on the commission. The government's the one who is mainly in charge of making policy and implementing policy. They're not giving a great deal of discretion to the BCUC on this. So there's a bit of a digression. The BCSEA is very interested in demand side management. In other words, energy conservation and energy efficiency. And when we go in front of the commission, we're arguing strongly that the utilities should do more energy conservation. They should, and the utilities are required to address DSM in their long-term planning, but they do have discretion over how much DSM spending and savings they will target in relation to all the other resources they acquire. So the BC Utilities Commission is required to follow detailed rules to assess the adequacy and cost effectiveness of these demand-side management plans that the utilities propose. The commission is more or less required to approve a DSM plan that is shown to be cost effective. But as I noticed above, persuading the utility to plan for more rather than less DSM is not something that is prescribed by law. It's something that you have to pressure them to do. So this is me and Bill Andrews. Bill Andrews is the lawyer for BCSEA, and I'm the policy analyst and consultant, and together we are the BCSEA's intervention team. We've been working at this for 18 years, over 300 interventions, and we're speaking for the public interest in sustainable energy and for our BCSEA members who want the energy they receive from the utilities to be sustainably produced. And why do we intervene? Well, this is a place we can directly influence the BC Utilities Commission decisions and the utilities actions. And this is, direct change in how the utilities procure energy, procure energy conservation, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. It's where the rubber meets the road for the utilities. We want to make sure that the green perspective is heard at the BC Utilities Commission. We use the knowledge we gain from interventions to speak to government, utilities, the public, and our members from a position that is well informed about the utilities issues. And finally, we engage with other groups, residential, commercial, industrial customers, unions, and First Nations. Highlights of what we've achieved. Usually what we've achieved is not very spectacular, but I pulled out the most spectacular thing we've done. 2005 to 2007, we helped to defeat a proposed 295 megawatt gas-fired power plant that BC Hydro wanted to procure and site at Duke Point on Vancouver Island. And as a result of the defeat of that power plant, we helped to shift the government policy away from gas-fired electricity generation, which had been the main policy, and onto renewables. Also, over the years, we've gained recognition from the BC Utilities Commission that green ratepayers are a legitimate interest group who are interested in more than just low utility bills. So right now, with the current energy and policy situation, the BC Utilities Commission is facing some really big decisions. How much to electrify and how much to use decarbonized gas. The government finally supports switching gas loads to electricity after many years of being fuel neutral. However, it's a challenge to electrify everything because gas currently supplies about 2/3 of BC's winter peak energy loads. Another big choice is what to accept as a decarbonized fuel. Should out-of-province renewable natural gas delivered by displacement be considered fair game to inject into BC's gas system? Should blue or turquoise hydrogen be considered sufficiently green? Would it be okay to couple gray hydrogen and natural gas with carbon offsets in order to deem that to be a decarbonized fuel? How much hydrogen can be mixed into the grid safely and effectively? And some big challenges we're facing in implementing an energy switch. Affordable energy bills, political must. Developing cheap, abundant, renewable electricity, renewable gas and/or hydrogen. Developing cheap electricity capacity to address peak loads. And of course, reconciliation with First Nations groups and their desire to participate in the energy transition. So on to electric vehicle charging issues at BC Utilities Commission. Public EV charging stations are a prescribed undertaking under the Greenhouse Gas Reductions Regulation. So the utilities are mandated by government that they may recover their costs from ratepayers. The provincial policy is for BC Hydro and Fortis BC to seed the public EV charging network in BC. The roadmap to 2030 talks about BC's electric highway and an intention to have 10,000 EV charging stations by 2030. And I'm pretty sure that means public participation as well. The utilities are not going to develop all those. Right at the moment, BC Hydro has 110 EV DC fast charging stations at 77 sites along most major highways. And Fortis BC has 40 EV stations at 22 sites in its service territory in south central BC. Avoiding cross subsidy between classes of ratepayers is a very big concern for the BC Utilities Commission, coming from its economic regulator approach. Also, the Commission has expressed a concern about avoiding having the regulated utilities outcompete would-be private providers of EV charging services. So that affects how it regulates the initiatives of BC Hydro and Fortis to provide a EV charging network. So in 2020, Fortis BC applied for EV DC fast charging rates with a time-based billing based on making a forecast of full recovery of all costs from people who use the DC chargers over a 10 to 13 year period. And this was approved by the BC Utilities Commission. However, in 2021, BC Hydro came forward with quite a similar rate application to the BC Utilities Commission. However, they acknowledged that they would require short-term subsidy of their rates by other ratepayers, and this was rejected by the BC Utilities Commission. BC Hydro must now submit a new application this year for a rate that will not require any cross-subsidy. More issues: accessibility for persons with disabilities. Many EV charging stations have accessibility problems due to curbs, hard to handle cables, and other things. And the BCSEA, along with the Vancouver EV Association, managed to get the BCUC to confirm that accessibility for persons with disabilities is an element of the quality of service for EV charging stations. And this hopefully will put a little bit more pressure on BC Hydro and Fortis to upgrade their stations, many of which are not fully accessible to people with disabilities. Peak load. Both Fortis and BC Hydro are now acknowledging that peak loads from electric vehicle charging are going to be increasing significantly in the near future and will threaten to contribute to the utilities' overall peak loads. And the consequence of that would be the requirement for expensive additional infrastructure and or generation facilities. So both BC Hydro and Fortis are working on on rates, methods to shift electric vehicle charging off the peak periods and onto the non-peak periods. BC Hydro's approach is what is known as a time of use rate, and that's what you see pictured here. They are going to apply to the Commission for permission to charge a premium of 5 cents per kilowatt hour on residential customers consuming energy during the peak period, and then a credit of 5 cents per kilowatt hour for energy produced, energy drawn during the off-peak periods, which is late in the night. Fortis BC, meanwhile, is taking a different approach, a software-based demand response, which they're going to pilot. This means actual software attached to the electric vehicle charger. The customer would volunteer to accept this, But having done so, the machinery would automatically interrupt charging during peak periods, and so hopefully reduce the overall peak load for the utilities. Okay, yes. If you heard the last week's throne speech, new legislation will also improve access to electric vehicle charging stations in condo buildings. No details provided, and it's too soon to say if that will be a BC Utilities Commission issue, but I think we all are aware that getting EV charging into condos is a significant issue. Measurement Canada's work on metering dollar per kilowatt hour billing. The BCUC is pressuring both Hydro and Fortis to implement dollar per kilowatt hour billing as opposed to their current approach of per meter billing. Under the federal law, energy-based billing must use Measurement Canada approved meters. However, the appropriate standards for DC metering have not yet been set, and accordingly, there are no approved DC fast charging meters. However, per meter billing and flat fee billing is allowed. So Measurement Canada is now offering a temporary dispensation for commercial level 1 and 2 EV charging station operators to use non-compliant meters with $1 per kilowatt hour billing until 2030. Measurement Canada is also working on terms for commercial DC fast charging and also for non-commercial electric vehicle charging stations. BCSEA advocates that Measurement Canada do this work quickly so that customers can use dollar per kilowatt hour billing. However, we advocate that the marketplace, not Measurement Canada, should decide whether a service operator will offer dollar per kilowatt hour billing or allow per minute or flat fee billing. Another problem is that Measurement Canada's current terms require a very stringent indemnification for any operator who seeks to get a temporary dispensation to use a non-compliant meter for dollar per kilowatt hour billing. And we think that needs to be rectified unnecessary. So in conclusion, lots of good commitments made, lots of work being done on implementation, lots more challenges ahead to fully achieve our sustainable energy transition. And so lots more work is still there for sustainable energy advocates like BCSEA or the Victoria EV Association. And that's it for me.
Great, Tom. Thanks. That was awesome. I'll kick off the questions here. So, some of the questions we've had with regards to looking at sustainable energy is the methane provider of choice in British Columbia. They are making the rounds of all the new municipal governments in the province, trying to get their product included as a clean energy source. And they say they're going to do that by renewable natural gas, renewable methane. Well, what they can't answer is, and what the government hasn't answered yet either, was just how much RNG needs to be in a pipeline before it's considered to be renewable gas provision. Is it 51%? Is it 2%? Any feedback from the BC Utility Commission on that?
If you're asking whether a small amount of RNG in the pipeline can green the whole supply, I think the answer is no. The commission is working on percentages. So if it's 2%, then it's 2% green, and if it's 90%, it's 90% green. I don't think that's in question.
Yeah, no, it comes down to the marketing. So
Oh,
yeah. So when they're
Sure.
going out and saying, in the future, Fortis will be all will provide you with renewable natural gas, which is a great zero carbon, all that great stuff. And so far, it doesn't seem to have a lot of truth to it.
right at the moment, Fortis is proposing that all new residential gas hookups would be deemed to be 100% clean, and based on the idea that you're putting a certain amount of renewable gas onto the system, and by deeming it or allocation, you're saying that all of it is going to be assigned to those new hookups. So we're BCSEA is working. Well, we haven't done our final argument, but I expect we'll oppose that, and I think a whole bunch of other people will oppose that.
Well, let us know how we can help, because we do have concerns with that as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. I don't see a whole lot of promotion of solar.
By BCSEA, yeah.
Yeah.
No, because we haven't gotten to it. BC Hydro has the last time BC Hydro had to acquire energy was a while back. Right at the moment, BC Hydro is working on building demand for clean energy by persuading people to electrify. And I would say in a few years, if electrification is successful, then there will be a need for BC Hydro to procure more energy. And then we'll get into the need for solar, wind, distributed energy, and the like.
Well, if you
It's
guys
coming.
if you guys need any help in there, because solar is the other half of what we do at BCEVA, and we'd be happy to talk, especially distributed energy generation. A lot of us have solar, so we're helping keep our neighborhoods propped up without BC Hydro spending anything for generation
Mhm.
or transmission or distribution. So
Yeah, and that's great.
and the other question I had was with regards to the uptake of charging, and I'm going to read off Steve's question here. With a plan to have 10,000 EV charging stations by 2030, considering how low the current count is, and just remembering working with BC Hydro a few years ago, that count has not changed dramatically in the last 4 years. We had worked with them to identify 200 individual places in the province that they would need to put in chargers, starting at 2 at a time and then fleshing them out to 4, 6, 8, or 10. And with the numbers that they're touting, they're not even up to the point of having 2 per site of the 77 sites. Yeah, so I think I would agree that that they're falling behind on the need for the BC Hydro side anyway. What's your impression of that?
Well, I think as far as I know, it's too soon to say. Hydro has just started filing information in front of the commission as to usership rates and things like that. So from our perspective, we don't know if they're being overwhelmed with demand or if demand is too low. Demand seems to be fairly encouraging from what little I've seen. I'm just talking about the sort of narrow BCUC world here. You have a broader perspective. I'm going to say that 10,000 figure that I proposed probably includes a lot more than just DC fast charging. I think that's I suspect that's a global figure. So BC Hydro and Fortis with their little, couple of hundred initiatives, that's a seed program. Hydro is working to double the number of stations at every site. I know that.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So Tom has a question. With the province putting a lot of effort into clean fuels, do they consider the life cycle emissions, which include emissions to make the ethanol and hydrogen that's injected into the clean fuels?
I think that's an ongoing issue. Nominally, at least, they do. The province uses what they call GH Genius, which is a model, a proprietary model that covers the whole supply chain, or pretty much all of it. And but that said, I think that going forward, the sort of kind of figures that we use to define the carbon intensity of renewable natural gas and other products will bear close attention to make sure that the real savings are being delivered.
Okay. There's but we could do a whole nother hour on just hydrogen.
We could.
Yeah.
Or 1 minute would be a better idea.
Yeah. Boo hydrogen. What was that? 2 seconds? Eric's got a question about government subsidizing charging. So like right now, government per se isn't subsidizing the charging DCFC on the road, right? Because BC Hydro has to make that have that paid for by the ratepayers, correct?
Mostly. Actually, I understand that Natural Resources Canada has kicked in money to help purchase the charging stations themselves.
Right.
So that's a fairly significant help.
Yeah, I'm trying to think that's like 25 or 30%, right?
Could be, and that's the capital cost. And then moving to the operating cost, yeah, the question is whether there's enough EV charging traffic to cover the overall costs. The electricity costs, the paying for the capital, the servicing. And initially, BC Hydro was saying upfront that no, they expected other ratepayers would have to subsidize the program in the initial years. And now they're crossing their fingers and optimistic that they might be able to file the upcoming rate that they file this summer, may be able to actually hope to cover the total costs.
Okay. And another point that Eric was making is that it's interesting to watch, governments and crown corporations going through all this effort to put out charging systems, and yet the legacy internal combustion engine OEMs, other than VW with Electrify Canada, which was a penalty imposed by the law courts for their pollution of everybody's lungs for a decade. Not seeing a lot of companies throwing a lot of money into helping with the charging setup. You could look at what the U.S. has done right now. They've said the federal government's going to throw $7.5 billion at the problem to make it get better. Eric makes the point that there's one EV maker out there who recognized the chicken and egg problem and decided to provide both. We know that it was we had the minister for energy mines and low carbon infrastructure on, and he was very proud that BC is leading with EV uptake and everything, but he didn't seem to be
No thanks to the provincial government.
Well, he didn't seem to be aware that most of the charging infrastructure hadn't been provided by government, but by private industry, i.e. one company, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, because the government is spending a lot of time and effort to power cars that aren't Tesla. And the only reason, well, the main reason I didn't buy a Tesla was because I like the form factor of the Kia.
Yeah.
The other one was the cost, but I'm being pushed to the wrong form factor because I'm driving a Kia that is rated at charging at 50 kilowatts and will charge at a maximum of 35, which doesn't bother me most of the time, but when I want to go somewhere, it takes forever. I've had the motor in my car replaced twice, the gearbox once, and I have to deal with Victoria Kia, not Tesla. And I've heard very little negative about Tesla. Tesla installed the infrastructure for most of the electric cars in the world right now. And then people are whining because they can't get free charging from BC Hydro. That's one of my rants. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We understand, Eric. Anything you'd like to address in that, Tom?
Most of this, I have to admit, I'm not super knowledgeable about those technical details. So, and we haven't actually come in front of the BC Utilities Commission as issues. So,
my point is that why is the government spending money on infrastructure for condos, apartments, MURBs, when all I have to do is legislate it? They say, you must do this, you must do that, or you can do this and you can do that. But why give money? The government's for governing, not for handing out cash.
Yeah, and in fact, once, and in fact, the government has had turned around. Most municipalities have already turned around to say, new construction, multi-unit residential buildings, which is about a third of our housing in British Columbia, new ones have to have charging provided with it, right? Because it's dirt cheap to put it in when you're building a building. And then that means that those places will have it. People who, want to go get into a condo, and when we all don't want to have our homes and we want to get into something smaller, we'll walk around, we'll look at condos, and we'll go, hey, this place looks really nice. Okay, I want to buy. What do I charge? And they go, well, you can't. Oh, buy, right? So. And the strata owner organizations, they get it. They understand that they've got to get moving, get their legacy buildings up to date to protect their owners' value in their homes, and that only gets to be more of an issue every single day. Sorry, that wasn't a question. It was just a rant. Sorry, my bad.
It's easy to get into a rant on these matters.
Oh, so easy. Any other questions? Oh,
It's Shelley.
hi, Shelley. Not user.
I can't change. There's no opportunity for me to change the name, like in the three dots on the right hand side of your little square. Usually you can change the name, but anyway, so that's anyway. Shelley.
Shelley, it's just a security thing.
changed it. So if you want to, Andrew.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, I'll do that in a second. I'll put my question out. Couple of things that I didn't quite understand. So there's three actually. Cross subsidized charging rates. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? And the other thing, another is, are there any to this date any cost per kilowatt hour level 1 and level 2 stations in BC? And then the third one is, did I hear you correctly saying that you didn't want the Measurement Canada determining whether people must have their cars charged or a fee per kilowatt hour, and instead you wanted the choice of whether it could be kilowatt per hour or time?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Shelley. So cross subsidy in this context means that BC Hydro or Fortis Electric Utility, in providing their charging service, they add up all the costs, everything it costs them to provide that service, and they also add up all the revenue that they receive from the people who use that service. And if the costs are greater than that, where are they going to, who's going to pay to cover the cost? Right at the moment, the government's, under the government's regulation, BC Hydro has a right to recover those costs. And therefore they would recover those costs from other rate players like, just regular homeowners or commercial building owners, and that constitutes a cross subsidy. And the BC Utilities Commission is staunchly opposed to cross subsidies. So that's what that issue is about. I hope that makes it clear.
Okay, I did understand that, but I don't really, that doesn't seem to be something that helps initiate or helps continue and grow the electric vehicle population.
Yeah, I agreed. We tried to mollify the BC Utilities Commission on that one, but they were quite stern. So dollar per kilowatt hour billing for level 1 and level 2. I suspect it exists somewhere in BC. I doubt if it's legal at this point. Right at the moment, Measurement Canada has put out their rules, their terms for a user to get a dispensation to allow them to do that. But I don't know if anybody has actually formally applied and gotten that.
And we should have Kelly Carmichael on here to talk about that, because maybe Robbie knows, but
You would not, yeah.
it's really complicated in that we don't have a way of measuring DC, but they're allowing to use inaccurate AC measurement, but making it so bureaucratically complex and opening yourself up for liability that nobody wants to do it because they're not making money at it. It's a service. It's like putting in a parking spot. No charge parking. You can no expense parking is a bonus to somebody. You go to a business, you don't have to pay to park there. Yeah. So they put in free charging, or the convenience of having a charging spot, which people forget to recognize, that the fact that a charging exists is the important part, not how much it costs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the irony is that don't most of the electric cars now, they tell the owner how much they've consumed, so that the people that actually do know are the users. But I mean, how you use that information, I don't know. I think it's ironic.
And Measurement Canada is only going to allow you to charge by the kilowatt hour and not the time. So if I go in with my car and almost empty and I want to charge to 100% and charge by the kilowatt hour, I pay by the kilowatt hour and I sit there for 2 hours. And the guy that has his Tesla Model Y that'll charge up in 20 minutes, he has to wait for me. And there's no incentive for me to move other than my morality. And if I'm not one of those people, I'll sit there for 2 hours or I'll go to work. And the car just sits there, and when it starts charging at 0, okay.
No, I'll that is an entirely, we can do an hour on this.
Yes.
Suffice it to say that Measurement Canada, who we were pinging off of 2 or 3 years ago to get their stuff together, hasn't quite got their stuff together. They recognize they need to have some temporary dispensation so that the grids around Canada can move forward. They've done that, so that's happening. They still have to pull their thumb out to figure out how they measure things accurately. And the fact is that the $57 million that they got to figure it out hasn't fixed the problem yet. So wait for further information. But when it does happen, and you do see a charge per kilowatt hour, that should be only one of the charges you see. You should see a charge on there for demand. You should see a charge on there for the slot, a charge on there for whatever.
Okay.
You know, the on the run chargers that are in there now, I've got a great example. They've got it already sort of like a line item in there. Tesla, when I'm in the States and I stop at a charger, I get a statement that shows, hey, here's what you paid and here's where it went to. So we'll hit that again another time. I'll have one more moment with you, Tom, and then we're going to go to a quick break, and we can line up because it looks like we might have our planned second speaker might be available. So, Tom, go ahead.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, yeah. Your third question, Shelley, about I guess optionality for the marketplace, time-based and kilowatt-hour-based billing. BCSEA went to the trouble of writing to the minister, Champagne, to confirm that time-based billing would not be excluded, and that Measurement Canada does not actually have an intention of pushing the marketplace one direction or another. And we got that confirmation. BCSEA recognizes that there are plenty of EV users who do want to be charged by the kilowatt hour and want to pay on that basis. But we also recognize that other people may have different views, or other providers may want to provide charging services billed in other ways. And in our view, it's better to let the marketplace decide. So the users go to the providers that they like to get the service that they want, and likewise. So that's why we're saying, let the marketplace decide.
Yeah, it's just the capabilities of taking a charge, as Eric was saying. Certain cars have a larger hose, as it were, to take the charge, and others don't. And then when you're being charged by minute, like with a Leaf, for example, you're getting a very small amount for a large amount of money, and for another car, you can, like Tesla, you could have your battery filled and be on the road and have a fairly small amount of money spent. So that's the fairness of the market too. I know you have to make money, these people who are providing the service, et cetera, and I understand that. That's complete. But there's also the customer who has differential capabilities of receiving that service. And so there needs to be some justice there. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, again from the Victoria EVA, and this will be up on our YouTube site here sometime next week. And thanks again for being here and let us know what a like-minded organization such as yours is doing.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks
Thank
again.
you, John.
Okay, let's take a couple minutes here
Thanks, Tom.
for any bio breaks, and hopefully at a quarter past we'll have a next speaker on, and if not, we'll launch into some other things.
I was just wondering, or just with I was on a seminar a couple of weeks ago with a chap who used to work with Power, or what is it? Power Smart, not Power Smart. The guys that sold power for BC Hydro into California and around the world, around this corner of the world anyway.
Power
And-
X.
Power X, that's right. And he's now at University of Calgary. He's an energy economist. And he was noting that the different formulas for like what we've done in BC, having stepped power rates versus what they've done in Ontario with peak power, off-peak, cheaper off-peak rates, middle of the night rates, and that sort of thing. Those things and the measurements that they have done and following that, there's been no difference. The movements towards off-peak charging or off-peak energy usage in Ontario really hasn't done anything to shave off the peak.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that we've done here, that really neither of the measures seem to have had hardly any effect at all in the surveys that they've done so far. I wish I remembered who hosted that. It might have been the Sierra Club or something like that that hosted it. But it was, or maybe it'd been the Observer. I think it was the Observer magazine that may have done it. But I found that interesting. Have you guys looked at all in emissions with relation to housing? You're looking at natural gas versus electricity, that sort of thing. Have you looked at all into the emissions involved in building a house or in renovating a house?
Well, BCSEA has not. That's kind of beyond our capability, but we're certainly aware that the what embodied emissions are a thing, and it's a very important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's just a huge difference. It's really hard to get any data on that, and the province, best of my knowledge, hasn't tried to do it. One of the few things I've come across was a study done in the UK back in 2010, and they had building a 2-bedroom cottage at 80 tons and refurbishing a 2-bedroom cottage at 8 tons, or 10% of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not building any 2-bedroom cottages here. All the houses here are thousands of square feet, and the average now is about 3,000, I think, versus what they're looking at is about 1,000. Anyway, thanks. Great presentation.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. So, just in case somebody doesn't know who Julian is a board member with the Victoria Electric Vehicle Association and also a businessman involved in the provision of electric vehicles who have previously been loved.
Thanks, Glenn. That was such a nice introduction.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, and he's has some observations to make on what's been happening on the market from time to time, and we thought it was a good time to check in with him now that some significant changes have happened. So take it away, Julian.
Well, I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. It's not like I had anything prepared, but yeah, I guess it's worth noting that the EV landscape has changed quite a bit. I just had an interesting conversation with one of my customers this morning. We're talking about the affordability of EVs and sort of basically what I've seen on the retail end of the sales business. Our average price for a used EV back in 2019 was $38,000, and that was up from the previous year was $32,000. And a great percentage of the population can afford a $38,000 EV, a used one, especially if it's broken down into monthly payments and amortized over 84 months. However, in 2022, the average price of a used EV sold through Motorized was $58,000. So we ran into a little bit of a crisis, well, several that all came together at the same time. We had a massive inventory shortage, a massive spike in the value of used EVs for a number of reasons, not only high gas prices, but just demand keeps growing and supply doesn't. Well, supply is slowly growing, but not as fast as demand. But we ran into an issue in 2022 where a lot of people couldn't afford EVs any longer because the sticker price was too high. And I'm certainly in full agreement with that. But the other issue that affected affordability for all sorts of consumers buying all sorts of things was interest rates. Interest rates skyrocketed after, you know, like a 5, 6, 7 year low, 10-year, I don't know, they've been low for a long time. Now they're high. So we had loans going out at 4.99% on used EVs for the longest time. And all of a sudden they're 8.99 and 9.99% for a used car. And so, so yeah, we did run into a big affordability crisis there with respect to the low cost EVs. I'm happy to report they're coming back now. Hang on 2 seconds. Just on a Zoom. Yeah, all yours. Hey, yeah, I'm excited to see that now the used, okay, so Tesla's prices have come down quite a bit. They've lowered their new car pricing, which is great because it helps spur demand and makes the cars more affordable. And of course, in BC brings these cars, Model 3s anyway, back down into the rebate territory, which is amazing. But that caused the value of the used Teslas to drop a significant value. Which is not so exciting news if you're an owner and you're trying to sell, but if you're just going to hold on to the car for the duration of the loan or whatever, it makes no difference. However, the affordability has just gone through the roof again, because now cars that used to sell for $60,000 used are now selling for $45,000 used. So I'm very happy to see that there's been this trickle down effect, and the affordability of used EVs, specifically longer range, big battery stuff is getting way, way, way better. So.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that, in that sort of Canada-wide, used car prices last year for the whole thing was like 38 grand, is including ICE, of course. And the new average price for an ICE vehicle was 57. So that is really interesting, because then, you know, we don't have the whole total cost of operations included in there, which, you know, of course, will make the EV even better. So.
I missed the non-EV, or what was the EV price? Glenn, you just gave the two prices, EV and the non-EV.
This is the Canadian market for all cars.
Yep.
38 grand used was the average, and 57 for new.
Okay.
Meanwhile, my value for used EVs in 2022 was 58,000, average used price. Yeah. There were some low-cost EVs in there, but I mean, Model Ys were selling for 100,000 plus, so that obviously skewed the numbers up quite a lot. But even used Model 3s were all 60 plus. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, they're coming down in price, and it's very nice. We've, for the first time in 3 years, we've got a whole stack of used 24 kilowatt hour Nissan Leafs, which is so exciting. There was a big void in the market there. If you're an entry level buyer, there was nothing available last year, and pretty much nothing available the year before either. But yep, times are changing.
Right on. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, I have asked me a question. I'll give you an answer.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's kind of interesting, because Tesla going high in the market was, it kind of provided the competing car makers, EV makers out there, a slot below Tesla where they could compete and sell some cars. And it looks like they didn't quite take advantage of it enough. And so Tesla's back down, and now they're making it difficult for them to sell new cars.
Well, Tesla's not making it difficult for them to sell new cars. Those manufacturers have made it difficult themselves because of a couple of factors. I mean, if you're manufacturing EVs and gas cars, and you choose not to invest in technology that lowers the cost of production, and you choose to produce such a small number of vehicles that you can hold your prices high because you're throttling production, then you have no pricing power. Tesla's taken the absolute opposite approach, in that they're building extra factory capacity and making deals with all of their suppliers to purchase more stuff at lower cost so they can produce more vehicles and maintain a margin. So Tesla built their pricing power in ahead of time, and everybody else thought it was some kind of joke. And they thought, well, we're going to keep producing gas cars, which are profitable for them. We're going to produce a super low number of EVs because the cost per kilowatt hour of batteries are very, very expensive. So if you're a manufacturer like Kia, for example, or you can pick any, it doesn't matter, like literally every manufacturer who's producing EVs other than Tesla, if you're making gas cars and they're profitable, and you know that with every gas car that you sell, you're going to sell X number of oil filters, X number of air filters and belts and O2 sensors and this and that and this and that, you can probably sell a nice extended warranty, and these manufacturers are going to rake in a whole bunch of money over the lifespan of that car. If instead of selling that gas car and getting possibly 20 years of aftermarket parts sales and labor service on that car, like it's a revenue stream that has a very, very long tail. If they sell an EV, they're going to sell a lot less stuff. So not only do they lose money on the EV upfront because they're not building enough volume to make money on the EVs, they're also giving away any future earning potential on that vehicle. So it's kind of a losing proposition for any manufacturer to sell EVs in volume if they're still selling gas cars. They kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off, wind down the gas car sales, increase the volume of their EVs to a point that they can be more profitable, and just focus on volume. It's a volume game, and if they're not able to do volume, they're not going to make it selling EVs. And you can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You know, a lot of people criticize Toyota for not having a game plan. And I could criticize them of the same thing. They were anti-EV for so long, and now they say, oh, everything's going to be an EV. Well, I think what they've done is they've taken a non-EV stance and just said, you know, listen, cost per kilowatt hours of batteries is very, very high. So we'll put a little teeny weeny battery in all these hybrids, and we're going to honk the hybrid horn until can't do that anymore. All the meanwhile, the cost per kilowatt hour of batteries has come down so far that Toyota now could be much more profitable should they choose to start building BEVs compared to what they would have been able to do 5 years or 10 years ago. They've avoided the competition because they're still making money on gas cars. They still have that 20-year, you know, lifespan of earnings coming in from parts and service down the line. So from a company economics standpoint, quarter by quarter, Toyota's been really smart because they're selling something that they're making money on with a future earnings attached to every car. But all the while, other people have been banging their heads against a wall, trying to figure out how to compete with Tesla or just build EVs, period, while they're really struggling to bring down the cost per kilowatt hour of batteries. Toyota's just sitting on the sidelines. So is Volkswagen, really, and everybody else. They're just kind of waiting on the sidelines for Tesla and the other EV producers to duke it out. Cost per kilowatt hour keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. And when they finally wave the white flag and say, okay, that's it, we're going to do EVs. Well, now they hopefully, if they have the scale to be able to build like big production numbers and get up to volume within a year or two, they can actually stand a chance to be profitable on EVs, provided they can get the volume there. So yeah, little back end politics happening within the industry. But
Oh yeah, and you know, talking about batteries, we've seen over the last decade the density you can get in the physical space of the battery triple. Production of EV batteries, production of EV batteries has done 10x in the last 10 years, and in the next 8 years, it's going to do somewhere between 6 and 8 times more, growing from today's numbers. So I mean, that is nothing other than, you know, produce more and more batteries for less money. But demand is still going to be a huge factor there. We have a lot of cars to replace in the light duty vehicle market at 1.2 billion to replace on the planet. The old number of 100 million ICE vehicles produced every year, well, that dropped as low as 85 million. GM back in 2018 made almost 10 million cars. Last year they made 6 million. So, you know, anyway.
People are voting with their dollars.
Yeah.
They're voting for electric.
And there's a lot of money being thrown at the media, to a lot of smokescreen up there, and oh, it's a chip problem, oh, it's a supply issue problem. It's a supply issue problem because you didn't plan 10 years ago to be producing EVs. Period.
Well, I don't think anybody honestly took Tesla seriously. Everybody thought that like so many other car companies, I mean, there's been 400 car companies in the United States alone that have gone bankrupt over the years and just ceased to exist. And most of them are little tiny names that we've never heard of. And I think the big OEMs, for the most part, assumed that Musk and Tesla would not build an automotive empire like that. And they just thought, well, this little flame is going to burn out and that'll be that. And so they didn't make long-term plans to compete. And now they're forced to make long-term plans, and they're in an uncomfortable position in that they're trying to catch up to the leader. But the lead, it's like trying to catch Usain Bolt if you're not even a runner. Well, like, it's not going to happen. But the technology does still keep getting cheaper, and those who really focus on it, they will be able to make a good dent in the EV market and grow, I'm sure. So
yeah, and I'll restate our editorial position here at the Victoria Electric Vehicle Association. Any EV is a good EV, But when we start talking about the industry as a whole and where the industry has to go, it's pretty easy to recognize when someone's doing it right. So,
Well, it's math,
to give
right?
credit where it's due, due. You know, you got to say it.
I would love to touch quickly on the perception about electric vehicles in general from cab drivers, if I may jump on this subject for a sec.
Sure.
I take cabs downtown. I had to pick up an I-Pace at Jag Victoria, so I took a cab down there and had to go to Volkswagen Victoria, and I had to go to Cal Tire, and I'm going all over the place. So I just cab everywhere, the Bluebird usually, and they're great, and they all have old Priuses with 10 billion K on them and whatnot. But every time I'm in one of those cars, I usually ask the driver, "Hey, what do you think about electric cars?" Just for kicks, because they all have an opinion. And most of these people are actually quite intelligent, love to have conversations about this kind of stuff. And they are professional drivers with a different perspective than I have for sure. And it's interesting, Bluebird bought a Kia Niro with a big battery. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. Like, way to go. And so they were all really excited about it, but they are all under the impression, all these drivers are under the impression this Kia Niro is not actually useful whatsoever as an EV. They don't even use the thing in taxi service. You can actually take a plate from one taxi and put it on another taxi and swap back and forth. So in the taxi industry in Victoria, you can kind of make any car a taxi without having to go through a big song and dance. Anyway, bottom line is these guys didn't know how to DC fast charge this thing. They were under the impression that if they pulled into a DC fast charger with 75%, they should be able to charge up to 100% within 5 minutes or whatever and just go. Because in the Prius, you can fill up with fuel in 30 seconds and go. And I had to explain, I've had the same conversation with like 7 different cab drivers. And I'm like, you guys have a Niro, why aren't you using it? They said, well, it says it'll go 400K, but it really only goes 300. And if you turn on the heat, it's 200. And if it's raining, it's 100. I'm like, no, that's not true. You can actually get 300 in the cold in that car. But nobody took the time to explain to them that if you run the thing down to 10 or 5 or 20% before you go into the DC fast charger, it will pick up charge really, really fast. I explained that to them and they're like, wow, we had no idea. So where do we charge it? Because all these chargers are slow. And I'm like, well, yeah, uptown and here and here and here. And I told them about PlugShare. They had no clue. So yeah, we do struggle with knowledge in terms of EV adoption because a lot of people just don't have any clue what they're looking at. And unfortunately, I'm not entirely certain that the salespeople that are selling these things give everybody the information that they really require in order to have the best ownership experience. So I think there's a long way to go for the industry as a whole in order to be able to serve all the correct information to owners so they can make the most out of these EVs and also help get a real positive message out there. The last thing you want is a professional saying, oh yeah, these electrics are no good. We're going to stick with the hybrid. We tried the electric and it didn't work. It's like it didn't work because you don't know how to use it. You know, it's like saying my cell phone doesn't work. Well, the battery's dead. Yeah, but it doesn't work. Yeah.
Do you think we should be hosting like a cabbie training thing so cab drivers can come and try out some cars? And
well, it's probably not a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, I would love to consider that. Though cab drivers are actually super passionate about driving in general, and if they knew what they were actually looking at, they'd probably feel pretty good about it. But yeah, I'd love to carry this on next week, perhaps. But I got a small group of people outside staring at me that want to talk to me,
Okay,
and
Julian.
one of them's in a Model S that I'd like to buy. So, so I got to run here. Sorry, this was a bit of an unplanned trip. Thank you for the invitation, Glenn, and I wish I could stay longer, but I got to split. But it is very nice to see all your smiling faces, and I hope to be on another Zoom soon.
Right on. Thanks, Julian. Julian, a motorized Victoria.
Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to see everybody. Bye for now.
See ya.
also apparently has an I-Pace for sale.
There we go.
No, I already sold it. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Bye.
Bye.
How much is the Model S going to be?
Bye.